हरि ओम। ओम सहनावतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति। श्रुति स्मृति पुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शंकरं लोकशंकरं शंकरं शंकराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तो पुनः पुनः। समस्त जन कल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्। हरि ओम। Brahma Sutra is the scripture that we all shall attempt to study. As the word indicates, it has two things into it: Brahma and Sutra. The later part, Sutra, is essentially an indication of how the scripture is organized. The very word Sutra indicates certain warnings to us. One, it is in the Sutra form. And the moment we say Sutra form, it follows certain diktats, and the diktats essentially presuppose that they are followed scrupulously. The very reason why a gigantic scripture is written in sutra form is essentially because it needs to be carried forward in oral tradition, maukhika. Is it that the art of writing was not developed, that the sutras are supposed to be maukhika? Was it not possible to have an elaborate thing written, maybe on the Bhurjapatra? The reason lies somewhere else. The reason lies in the fact that when the knowledge reaches the highest possible level, then every single utterance which comes from the depth of the highest possible consciousness needs to be memorized as it is, as if the one who got this revealed is speaking while reiterating those words. None of the words can be modulated even by sound. Forget about the punctuations. No words can be added to it. No words can be deleted from it. Not only that, the sangati of the words, the pronunciation or the sound of the word cannot be and need not be altered if one is keen on having the original meaning to be transferred to the listener. More the words, more the confusion. So the first quality of a sutra is alpaksharam. It ought to be terse. It ought to be compacted. At the same time, moment you compact anything that you want to say, there is a possibility of confusion that might be created. It may not convey what you intend to convey. So it is not only that it should be alpaksharam, but it has to be asandigdham. There should be no doubt lurking in the mind of the listener when the sutra is pronounced. It should be absolutely without fault. It should be vishwato mukham. Alpaksharam asandigdham akshobhyam vishwato mukham. The interpretation of the sutra has to have equanimity of application. With these kind of criteria being put in there, the sutra then receives the kind of spiritual weightage that it is expected to have, and Brahma Sutras are written in this form. The logical corollary of the Sutra Bhasya or Sutra scripture is, because it is in such a compacted form, it goes without saying that to understand it is not so easy. In order to make it lucid, in order to make it understandable, it needs to be expanded in detail without losing the essence of what is being said in sutra, at the same time making it palatable, understandable by the reader or the listener. And such a commentary made on the sutra is called Bhasya. So you have the esoteric truths revealed at the height of meditation for and by the rishis or the munis as an act of extreme high level of contemplation, being uttered in the form of precise and compact statements called sutras, further elucidated and elaborated by the commentaries called bhashyam, yet even the commentaries itself can be complex. So the very attempt to simplify the sutra in the bhashyam, there arises a need to simplify the bhashyam further. And when that thing happens, the Vartika is born. Then again in the Bhashyam and the Vartikam, some of the difficult areas or the glossaries need to be further elaborated. And the Tika is born. Sometimes it needs, on behalf of the commentator, to give lots of drushtantas, and then the Vakyanam comes, Panjika comes. So a series of literature is formed with single intention of explaining the sutra. Such is the case of the sutra, and these sutras which are written about the subject matter is Brahman. So it is Brahma Sutra. The sutras are normally either famous by the person who has written it, like Patanjali Sutra, Paniniya Sutra, named after the author or the honorific title of the author. Or the sutra can also be referring to the subject matter. Brahma Sutra is a scripture written in sutra form about the subject Brahma. This brings us to a very, very important point. What is Brahma? And to know what is Brahma, not by etymological standpoint, etymologically it is nothing else but it is coming from a dhatu called bra. Braha is to expand, to grow, to enlarge. That which has the capacity and which has either enlarged or apparently enlarged is Bra or Brahma. But the very need for this word has arisen from something different. We all observe the world around us. So has been observed by all those who were born on this planet. Maybe by those who were in another planets, we are not aware of it. The first impression that we get when we observe things around us is the curiosity, the jidnyasa about the available impressions on the mind of the things that are there around. There is that first feeling that I exist. So my observation starts from the standpoint that I, and then the observation, the observed. So I come to know that I am in this world, and I see human beings similar to me. I see the sentient objects, a huge expanse of trees and plants, which do have sentience into it, but they don't move. I see a huge expanse of animal kingdom, having sentience and movement both. I see human beings around me similar to me. Then I see insentient things apparently from my point of view, which are in the forms of mountains, rivers, the wind. And when I see all of them, animate or inanimate, the question comes to my mind, who are they? From where did the river come? From where did the mountain come? From where did the animals came? From where did the human beings come? From where I came, and I see that everything that comes in here also goes out of here. There is a constant dance of death and destruction, alternating with life and construction. It is still, with the advent of science, it is beyond the scope of my intellect to understand why those phenomenal sized galaxies are moving away from each other. Why are those millions of stars dancing there, colliding with each other? Why is it that they attract each other in the form of gravity? Why is it that the straight light apparently bends according to the science? Since how long this whole thing has been existing? The time, as I call it, must have had an origin. What was the point when the time started? Me as a human being, I'm able to perhaps conceive a three-dimensional thing. But is it that the dimension is something that is restricting me? Is there a world without dimensions? Can there be 10 or 15 dimensions? So many civilizations came and vanished. Who is the one who keeps the check on the clockwise precision of everything that is happening around me? Who gave the order to the light that it should travel in the straight line? Who decided these speeds of different entities? The wind has a different speed than the light, than the sound. And all these things perplex us. As the famous philosopher Durand says in philosophy, the story of philosophy, earth is changed in gentle systole and diastole of growth and dissolution. And all civilizations, few people have always endeavored to find the answers for them, called philosophers in the Western stance, while the one in India were called the thinkers, the Munis. But in case of Indian perspective, the Munis and the Rishis both thought about these intricate issues that plague the mind of human beings, not for the sake of curiosity of knowledge, but to find a solution to the existing painful existence. That is why Muni was not only a thinker, but thinking for the sake of salvation. Mananat trayate iti munihi. The Rishi also, Rushyati jnanena samsara param, is the definition given by none else than the famous Buddhist monk Taranath, who unfurled the torch of Buddhism from India to way far off in those ancient times in Mongolia, has defined the Rishi as Rushyati jnanena samsara param, the one who reaches beyond the mundane world. So Ru is a dhatu which says to go or to move. The first thing that the Indian ancient Rishis realized while contemplation, that Everything in the existing world is ephemeral, transitory, existing for the time being. And that is why the first epithet, the title given to the ever-changing world was Jagat, that which is born and is moving. There's a constant transformation or the change that is happening. In fact, there is nothing permanent except change is the first realization by the observation of the rishis of the ancient era. And promptly came the question, if everything is ever changing, then what is the backdrop or the substratum for this change to take place? And the one which is acting as a substratum to this ever-changing world has to be something which is permanent and non-changing. So the focus first happened to be on the Jagat. What is precisely the nature of the world or the objects around me? Am I the object in the world, or I am the subject in the world for these objects as far as subject-object relationship is concerned? Only the constituent of the world, then I'm also object. Yet I have a subjective capacity to see the object. And even if I say it is full of subjects or objects, whatever it is, when did this world came in existence? How did it begin in time? It appears to be spread over in the space. Who created the space? And what is this time after all? Does this world have a creator? And if at all there is a creator, from what did he create the world? The thinking process of the rishis and the munis knew no bounds. And for that, all that was required by them is to sit still, quiet, and contemplate. Take a thought, contemplate over it, and the contemplation required enormous amount of concentration at the cost of forgetting everything else. The thread of the thought was taken right in front of the mind for the sake of analysis. And then a strange thing happened. When at the exclusion of every other thought, when one thought is pursued, whatever may be the nature of the thought, the curiosity of about the time, curiosity about the world, curiosity about the object, curiosity about anything for that matter, as long as one single thought is taken in front of the mind for the sake of thinking, with a complete exclusion of all other thoughts, they realize that the nature of an object becomes more and more bare open than what the senses are able to perceive. What so far I saw through my eyes as an object of a stone, maybe an object of reverence as the pratika of a deity, is no more an object of stone, but it is exploding in itself and trying to show me something more than what my indriyas or my eyes saw. When I focused on the sound that I hear, they realize that I am now seeing something more in the sound that I heard than the sound heard in the first place. The object or the thought that was kept in front of a single pointed focus was the dheya, the aim, the goal, and the attempt to catch hold of that dheya and be at the same point of the dheya was then called dhyanam. A continuous, incessant flow of thought in one direction towards the object or the thought that is taken in front of the mind, as if the flow of oil is happening, Taila Dharavat. So they struggled a lot to stop other thoughts entering into the mind when one thought is being contemplated upon. They realize that the mind has to catch hold of this particular thought. Catching hold of the thought at the exclusion of others in its first attempt was dharana. Every time he was attempting to focus on that single thought or object, he was being distracted by other thoughts. It was named as a vyuthana samskar. Going out, the outward tendency. As Kathopanishad says, paranchikhani vetrunat swayambhu. The senses that are condemned to look outwards are to be blocked, closed, stopped, and the flow of thought is to be focused on a single point. And when this attempt of meditation or the dhyana was used for thinking, the observation of the world was complete through the senses. Everything was seen, heard, tasted, touched. The ephemerality of the world was ascertained. Now was an attempt to find out the reasoning behind it. And the intention of knowing this was to know that substratum which is unchangeable, which must be making this change possible, or to find out that creator who created this everything, including perhaps me, to understand where that creator is different than me. What was his process of creation, if at all the creator is there? And in addition, the doubt started lurking in the mind. Is it created? Everything is created as a creation, or is it that I feel that it is created? Is it a notion that I'm carrying that the world is created, or it is created definitely? One reasoning was telling that everyone in this world ascertains that yes, it is existing. But mere ascertainment by everyone as a constituent of the cosmos or the universe, is it a guarantee that it exists? And if it exists, then where does it go when I sleep? In the deep sleep, I'm completely unaware of this world. Where does it go? And between the deep sleep and the awakened state or the Jagrata Avastha, I have a middle Avastha where I see lots of things exactly like the way I see them in my awakened world, but they are not in the awakened world and I'm not sleeping. That is Swapna Avastha. Everything appears absolutely as certain as in Jagrut Avastha, yet I know that it gets sublated when I'm awake. When I sleep and get up, I come to know that I was asleep. That means my state of sleep gets ablated by my waking state. My state of dreaming gets ablated by my waking state. I am definitely a privy or a witness to all the three states. In the waking state, if I know I am, then in the dream state, who sees the dream? And in the deep sleep, where is that awareness that I am? Where does it go? And the question came, if sleep, dream can be sublated by the awakened state, then the doubt came in the mind, can the awakened state be sublated by some other state? If there are three states of my existence, can there be fourth one? Or there are many states? Now the flights of imaginations knew no bounds. The questions were being asked by the rishis. I see the darkness and I see the daylight. Is there a possibility of a time when there is no light and no darkness? It is utterly impossible for us to imagine a situation when there is no light and there is no darkness, because we are used to only two states. Then came further question. There is existence of world. There might be a state in which there is no world. What would be the situation? What would be there when nothing is there? How was the situation when nothingness was there and somethingness was there? And this lofty thoughts came pretty early in the minds of rishis and munis, as can be traced by the ancient most texts of the world, the Veda, the Dasham Mandalam of Rigveda, which includes Nasadiya Suktam, is a brilliant example of how the thought process has progressed. Na asat asit tadanim, na asit rajo na vyomo paroyat. Nothingness was not there, not the existence. Nothingness was not there, not the existence. There was no air. There was no heavens beyond it. Na mrityuhu asit, na amrutam, na tarhi na ratyam ahan asit praketaha. Then there was neither death nor immortality, nor was there torch of day and night. We find it difficult even to imagine a situation when there is no day, no night, no immortality and no mrityu. The intellect gets paralyzed even at the thought of these things. But such were the lofty heights of contemplative ideas that emerged in the mind of rishis. And it dawned upon the rishis that everything that is seen in this universe or the created world is nothing else but a insentient thing carrying an absolute sentient substance, some substance inside it. Everything is achetana. They called it achetana, that which does not have consciousness. And at the center of all this achetana, when the chetana enters into it, it becomes chetana yukta. So the creation is nothing else but the entrance of the consciousness into jada or achetan thing. So the coverings or the matter vestures are nothing else but the upadhis. So all you see in and around us are nothing else but the interplay of upadhis. The upadhis come and go. The divestment of Chaitanya from achetana is death. Investment of Chaitanya in achetan is birth. The upadhis undergo constant transformation. None of the transformations are possible unless it is supported and supplemented by the Chaitanya. These were some of the truths that started dawning. Now the jidnyasa, the curiosity, is focused on 6 important things. What is jiva, the individual soul? What is jagata, the world or the creation? Presuming that this world and the individual soul is regulated by somebody, the regulator or the creator, Ishvara, how are we connected to each other? The jiva, the jagata, and the jagadishwara, how are they connected to each other? The bandha. Is it possible to get rid of this bandha and become free, moksha? And if it is possible, what are the means of achieving it? Sadhanani. So jiva, jagata, ishvara, bandha, moksha, sadhana. These were the 6 focuses which the rishis selected for contemplations, and for the contemplations they sat in almost a motionless state, taking the only thought about what they were contemplating as the only thought in the mind. By sheer power of concentration, through years of deliberate attempt to keep the mind focused on one particular thought or the object. And they realized that the thought process, which was so far applied through the senses, was a very, very limited application of thought process. Whatever is sensuous is extremely limited. So the first revelation was there is something suprasensuous, atindriya. Yogi Arvinda calls it as superior mental. This expansion of understanding, which was directly the expansion of intellectual ability, the dhi, buddhi, which was so far working through the means and mediums of the indriyas, is now slowly moving out of the limitations and getting established at higher and higher planes of understanding. They were referred to as the higher levels of consciousness. From the sensuous consciousness, Supra-sensuous consciousness is being achieved. The revelation started coming. Something that was never ever experienced before was being experienced by the rishis at the height of contemplations of the meditations. Not only was this different in terms of knowledge content, it was different even in the experience. The new knowledge that was coming through meditation was giving vivid picture of what was so far seen as a restricted meaning of the objects and the subjects around. The grandest experience that the rishis had was the diversity that I see in the normal sensuous world starts disappearing as I move or ascend on the higher planes of consciousness. They kept on moving upwards and upwards in the levels of consciousness. With every greater revelations, they realized it is not the same buddhi that was working at the level of vyavhara. This buddhi appears to be highly advanced and highly expansive and penetrating in nature. They gave the name of such buddhi that was taking the flights. They started calling it as pratibha. Every time this particular torch of intellect was becoming brighter and brighter as they moved upwards into the levels of consciousness. And that light of the knowledge was being given by this highly refined intellect, which was taking flights through pratibha, and every time dawning the new expanse through the higher enlightened buddhi. Now it was referred as prajna. With the help of the prajna, samprajnat, the higher levels of consciousness were achieved. As they kept moving upwards and upwards and upwards and upwards, a stage came when they realized that the meditator and the thought of the meditation are going closer to each other. The gulf or the distance between the meditator and the meditative object or the thought is becoming less and less. The subjective experience, the subject is approaching the object. The consciousness of the subject and the consciousness now seen in the object, they are coming closer to each other. And a stage came when the consciousness of the subject and the consciousness of the object merged into one. The meditator and the object of meditation, the dhyata and the dhyaya became one. And when the dhyata, dhyaya became one, dhyan disappeared. When the object and the subject became one, the experience disappeared. It is at this point they realized even the prajna is no more existing. So that experience, which was not an experience because experience presupposes two, here it was all one. So it was called intuitive knowledge. That intuitive knowledge happened at a level where prajna was not there, asamprajnat samadhi. That was the time when all the questions that were so far being investigated through the jidnyasa were brought to naught. No question remained in the mind. And the end of all these questions was nothing else but the revelation of the ultimate truth. That ultimate truth was named Brahma. Now came the time when they again descended from this height of consciousness where everything has ended into the samadhi down from the supra-sensuous or the supra-mental world as referred by Yogi Aurobindo to the mental world or the sensuous world. There was a hazy boundary between the supra-sensuous and the sensuous world. The glorious descent of the one who had reached to the land of intuitive land of ultimate reality called Brahman, when he started descending down, there was again separation between the dhyata and the dhyaya. Dhyana was there. The object got separated from the subject. The ahankara was again brought into the existence. The sensuous experience started dawning again. Right at the hazy boundary of supra-sensuous and sensuous world, they started uttering the experience that they had. The utterances of the rishis during this glorious descent from supra-sensuous to sensuous world was the nad, the sound, the pure sound, the paravani. It could not be articulated. It was heard. Since it was heard, it was called Shrut or Shruti. That was the origin of Veda. When this Paravani got formulated into the form of Sankalpana, ideation, still the boundary of sensuous was yet to be reached. As it touched the boundary of sensuousness, it became Madhyama. The para became Pashyanti at the Sankalpana level. From Sankalpana level, it came into structured form called Madhyama. And then, almost at the time when this sensuous world was touched, it came out as Vaikhari, the utterances. Those utterances formed the essence of Upanishads in the Vedas, the Jnana Kanda of the Veda. That which was in the Uttarardha of the Veda, Brahmana Samhita Aranyaka Upanishad is the structure of the Veda. That which comes into the Uttarardha, in the Aranyaka and the Upanishad, is interspersed with these utterances of those rishis who descended from the glorious heights of ultimate reality. And since they reproduced, or what came from their Vaikhari was nothing else but what they heard there while still in the supra-sensuous world, is called, heard by them, Shruta, Shruti. That is why Veda are referred as Shruti. And that is why Upanishads are called Shruti Prasthana. Prasthana is to go away, move forward. When you want to move away or forward from the mundane world towards the land of intuitive, land of ultimate truth, the journey is taken with the help of three scriptures: the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, and the Bhagavad Gita. The Upanishad is called Shruti Prasthana. Shruti Prasthana because, as we just now saw, it is something that was heard. It was not a normal hearing. It was suprasensuous hearing, which came in the form of utterances. The one who is at the height of experience. It is our common experience into the common world also, that if somebody has tested something exquisite, and if you ask him, how is the test of this particular thing that you tested? He doesn't use the word, he uses words which do not exist. It's ah. Now, ah is not a word. It is just an expression. Because words, he feels words are shorter to express what he has felt. He wants to express the depth of his experience, but he finds words to be very lame. The Vaikhari becomes very lame to express even in the common vyavahar. Imagine the ultimate experience that they had in suprasensuous world being expressed. That is why in the Upanishads, great and the ultimate truths are there interspersed in those utterances, in those sutras, in those Upanishadic statements. However, not all of them are understandable by us. And many a times, since we look at those suprasensuous utterances from subsensuous land, that was a paroksha jnana, we are trying to take paroksha jnana. That is why, while interpreting the Upanishads, we come across difficulties and we come across confusion or apparent virodhabhas. We say Brahman is the ultimate reality, but when we see Chandogya Upanishad, it refers to Manomaya. It also refers to Prana. Everything comes from Prana. Prana is to be worshipped. So is Prana Brahman? Is Manomaya Brahman? Mana itself is nowhere close to Brahman. Then how is it that Manomaya has been said to be worshipped in Chandogya Upanishad? This apparent confusions, virodhabhas, needs to be sorted out by an absolute logical analysis, reasoning, thinking, and also thwarting the opinions wrongly given by others about these utterances. All this attempt of streamlining the sayings of Upanishads and making the real essence of the Upanishads clear by establishing without any confusion is the work of Brahma Sutra. So it is called Tarka or Nyaya Prasthana. An attempt of logical reasoning to sort out the Upanishadic utterances and weeding out the virodhavas from them, and also settling the different interpretations given on Upanishads in order to bring to the fore the fact that all that Upanishads talk is about Brahman. Brahma is the ultimate reality, and the interpretations which do not call Brahma as the ultimate reality are to be refuted so that Brahma is the ultimate reality is substantiated. That is the work of Tarka Prasthana, Nyaya Prasthana, or Brahma Sutra. It is all right. Brahman as the ultimate reality, Brahma as the ultimate reality is established by the Upanishads. And it is so, is logically reasoned out by the Brahma Sutras. But the fact remains that I know what is ultimate reality by reading. Every one of us knows Brahman. I also will come to know at the end of Brahma Sutra that it is logically established that it is the final purport of all the philosophy and final ultimate reality. But the major question is, how do I reach the ultimate reality? The entire exercise of Upanishad and Brahma Sutra, the Shruti Prasthana and the Nyaya Prasthana, is useless unless I know how to reach there. And this substantial part of preparing a common man, a common human being, and to a sadhaka, by the help of the sadhana is the function or the utility of Bhagavad Gita. The sadhana prasthan, the means to be adopted, the exercises spiritual to be adopted by the mind and the body in order to reach the ultimate reality is given in the Smruti Grantha called Bhagavad Gita, which is known as Sadhana Prasthan. Now, the Bhagavad Gita is called Smruti Prasthan because it is by those who have attempted to do it by themselves and have written about their own experiences. Since remembering what has been told in the Shruti, the remembrance at every juncture of the spiritual journey, what was told in Shruti, when one adopts his way towards the ultimate reality, it becomes a Smruti. It is essentially an individual soul's attempt to remember the Shrut, the heard. The attempt is to remember what is heard, because those who heard knew the reality. So Shruti is remembered by individual soul and attempted to obtain the ultimate reality becomes Smruti Prasthan. So Smruti Prasthan, which is a Sadhana Prasthan, Shruti Prasthan, which is the Veda, and the Nyaya Prasthan or the Tarka Prasthan, which is the Brahma Sutra, three of them together are considered to be thus far and no further triumvirate, the three important grantha for the human beings to achieve the final destinations of their birth. In fact, it became mandatory for the teacher, the acharya, to write a bhashyam on each of them. Then only the title of acharya was given. So acharya is one who writes the bhashyam or the commentary on Upanishada, Brahma Sutra and Bhagavad Gita, as rightfully most of the acharyas have done. Yes, acharyas like Ramanujacharya have not written on Upanishada, but have written on Brahma Sutra and Bhagavad Gita. All the acharyas have written on Brahma Sutra. That brings us to the point that the Indian philosophy is broadly divided into those who agree with the authority of Veda and those who do not. Those who agree with the authority of Veda are called Astika Darshana, wrongly perceived or spoken by us as those who believe in God are Astik. No, Astikyata is belief in Veda. So we have those who believe in Veda, and those who do not believe in Veda are called Nastika Darshanas. The Jains, the Buddha, Dharma, and the Charvak are the Nastika Darshanas. They reject the authority of Vedas, while all the other Darshanas are Astik Darshan. Darshanas are nothing else but the further expounding of the philosophy of these three main granthas into the systemized form of philosophy. There are differences in these Shad Darshanas. The Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Yoga, Sankhya, Purva Mimamsa, Uttar Mimamsa, the Shad Darshanas have differences in each of them, but all of them do agree to Veda, and all of them believe in Brahman as the ultimate reality. The naming could be different. Some of them require the presence of Ishvara in them, some of them don't. The Purva Mimamsa doesn't find the need of having a god as an instrument in between. The yoga does believe in Ishvara, but in a different form as a Vishesha Purusha. The Sankhyas do not find the need of Ishvara anyway. All these darshanas being reconciled, brought towards the ultimate reality Brahma, and how Nastik darshanas are not doing the right judgment by disbelieving in Brahma and Veda, and how the Vedic or Astik darshana, although they are differing, their approach towards the Brahma is differing, otherwise their belief in Brahma is right. All this has been tackled in one grantha, that is Shankaracharya's Brahma Sutra. On one hand, Brahma Sutras are taken in explanation, and while explaining or commenting on the Brahma Sutras, commenting on the ultimate reality, simultaneously all other opinions are either straightened or annihilated. The Sankhya Tattvajnana is highly respected in the commentary of Shankaracharya as far as Brahma Sutra is concerned, yet the defects, what were perceived by him, by Shankaracharya, from the standpoint of Keval Advaita, has been mentioned. The Sugatas, the Buddhas, and their concepts have been thoroughly thrashed. So the study involves the study of all these aspects. And it starts with a very important conception before even starting the commentary on the first sutra. And the first pre-sutra commentary part is called Adhas Bhasya. This Adhyasa Bhashya is going to be the most critical part to be seen. What is Adhyasa, or the superimposition? Adhyasa is nothing else but Vivarta. What is Vivarta? What is Adhyasa? How did it originate? What is this concept of Adhyasa propounded by Shankaracharya in his commentary? Well before the commentary on the first sutra will be the subject of the coming session. Hari Om. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Harihi Om.
Hari Om. Sanjay ji,
Hari Om.
actually I have small 2-3 questions. I don't know whether the time will be permitted. Can you explain in briefly this Vartikam, Tika, Vyakhyanam and Panjikam again, please? I just missed it.
Yeah, yes. In case of the first thing is Sutra. Because in the Sutra form, we find that most of the truths are written in the Sutra form. So, Sutra is brief, clear, Saravat, Pithi, Vishwatomukha, multifaceted, smooth, Astobhyam, and anavadya, faultless. This is how the sutra has been defined in Skanda Purana. Bhashya is elaboration. Sutrartho varnyate yatra padaihi sutraanusarabhihi swapadani cha varnante bhashyam bhashya vido viduhu. Elaboration on the meaning of the sutra is bhashyam, or the commentary. Now, the commentary made on the sutra also becomes complicated in the sense that it is still not clear. So, in order to clarify the commentary, for example, on the Brahma Sutra, which is a commentary on Brahma Sutra by Shankara Bhashya, that Shankara Bhashya was further explained by Vachaspati Mishra in Bhamati. So, Bhamati becomes a Vartika. So, what is Vartika? Vartika is what is stated in Bhashyam, perhaps what is not stated, left unstated in Bhashyam, and what is unclearly expressed in Bhashyam is expressed in Vartika. Now, Vartika again needs further explanation. So, it is also, Vritti is explanation of Sutra, but it is not as elaborate as Bhashyam. It takes only certain aspects and explains it. So it is Vritti. So we have on Sankhya Sutra Mathar Vritti. Then, while explaining, there are certain rules that are followed. In Bhashyam, Vartik and Vritti. First the Padached, then Shabdartha, then Lakshanartha. So every time the explanations are made, nothing from your side is added. Only you're elucidating or explaining. In case of a tika or Vyakhyana, you add your own examples. So when Drushtanta is added, it becomes tika. And sometimes we don't need all these explanations. We need only certain words or certain cryptic clues to be explained. For example, Athato Brahma Jidnyasa, Atha word is considered very cryptic. In fact, Brahma Sutra doesn't have a Mangala Charana, which was the rule of the day. The reason is Atha itself is supposed to be Mangalakari. Now, Atha has a meaning of Mangalakari. What exactly Atha means? So that one word requires a lot of explanation, sometimes going into pages. When such explanation is given, it is called Tippani, explanation of difficult words of a particular thing. So you have Sutra, then Bhashya, then Vartika, then Vritti, then Tika, and then Tippani. Hari.
So you, in between there is a Panchigam or something you are mentioning.
Panjika or Panjikam is also similar to Tippani, but here not words, but certain sankalpa taken and explained. For example, you want to know only about Aparoksha Anubhuti. Now, Aparoksha Anubhuti is itself a grantha. But suppose what is Aparoksha Anubhuti? There are certain concepts explained there. You take one only concept and speak about it. So it is a very small thing, but it is taking only a part of that original thing. Bhashyam, Vartika, Vritti, they are taking all the parts. Moment we come to Vyakhyana, they are taking all the parts but with examples. In Tippani, only words. In Panjika, concepts, only one concept. So it becomes a supplementary thing for the original Bhashyam. Hari.
Now my second question is, we have discussed this Pashyandi, Madhyama and Vaikari. And rishis were able to ascend as well as descend through these different steps, aren't they actually? Okay. Now my third question is there any scripture in the world like Brahma Sutra in any other faith?
We would say it this way, that the attempt to find out the ultimate reality has been equally done with great ferocity by the Western philosophers also. But perhaps the difference between the Western philosophers' attempt and the Indian or the Eastern philosophers, Oriental philosophers' attempt is that there it was more of a curiosity, and the personal life and the search of curiosity, they never kept a tandem with each other. That is why we find Western philosophers suffering from depression, suffering, committing suicide, being debaucherous in their life. So if you look at all these, most of their biographies, we find it very surprising that such an intelligent man but had a very, very low moral life. In case of the Indian or the Oriental philosophers, the philosopher always had the need of the philosophy or the curiosity of this particular intellectual research. It was not done for the sake of knowledge alone, for the sake of quenching the thirst alone. It was done with the sole purpose of transformation of an individual into the land of ultimate reality, so that the goal was very clear. Goal was not only the secular knowledge or the laukika jnana. The goal was paralaukik or alaukik anubhav. That was the difference. That is why perhaps the height at which the Indian philosophy could reach, others did not reach to that level. The capacity as well as the attempt both depended upon what was the aim for which this philosophy was pursued. The pursuit of philosophy for an Indian Rishi or Muni was initially, of course, the same as the Western philosopher, to find out more about what is there around us. But the way they went about it, the process of their going about it, was through the act of meditation after purifying the chitta. This particular thing, although it was like somebody who has gone to really search for some shining thing and suddenly has gone so deep that got a diamond in the hand. So the process, as you see in Veda, initially the karma kandas all explain something similar, those gods propitiating the gods. But as the thoughts got refined and refined, as the sadhana becomes refined and refined, the higher truth started prevailing. That prompted them to go further higher till the last point. And that is how the way and the method that was adopted by Indian philosophers was a completely different method and the completely different objective. That is perhaps the reason why Indian philosophers could reach to that level. That is why we don't call them alone Tattvajna. We call them Muni in their first stage, because the one who contemplates for Trayate, objective was very clear, to get rid of this life, to this bandha, to become mokshatva prapti. Hariyo.
सहस्रशीर्षा पुरुषः सहस्राक्षः सहस्रपात् स भूमिं विश्वतो वृत्वा अत्यतिष्ठद्दशाङ्गुलम् पुरुष एवेदगुं सर्वं यद्भूतं यच्च भव्यम् उतामृतत्वस्येषानः यदन्नेनातिरोहति एतावानस्य महिमा अतोऽध्यायागश्च पूरुषः पादोऽस्य विश्वाभूतानि त्रिपादस्यामृतं दिवि त्रिपादोर्ध्व उदयित्पुरुषः पादोऽस्येहाभवात् पुनः ततो विश्वं व्यक्रामत् सासनानशने अभि तस्माद्विराडजायत विराजो अधिपूरुषः स जातो अत्यरिच्यत पश्चाद्भूमिमथो पुरः यत्पुरुषेण हविषा